Coming up on this week's episode of Destination Linux, the roundtable meets to discuss the subject of what is the best Unix shell, and is it time to switch to ZSH? We have a new Kali Linux out with some surprising changes. A new game just dropped for Linux, and it has a very dark premise, but it's also happy. It's weird. We'll get into it in the game pick. And of course, we have our popular tips, tricks, and software picks. Also, don't forget to mark your calendars because we have the DLN Gaming Night coming for you to all join us and play some awesome games on August 30th, right after Destination Linux Live at 4 p.m. Eastern. So if you're not a gamer, go and download the games. We'll cover them again in the gaming sections of which games we're going to play, and get ready because it's going to be a ton of fun, and you'll be able to at least destroy Noah because he doesn't game at all, and have fun doing that. All of this and so much more coming up right now on Destination Linux. Intro road. Look at us. We're the Destination Linux podcast. Welcome to episode number 188. You're tuned into the number one, the greatest, the best video-centric Linux podcast on the planet, Destination Linux. We're your source for great discussions on Linux and open source. My name is Ryan, and with me today are the secret menu items of your favorite fast food restaurants, Noah and Michael. Let's find out what everyone's been up to this week. Noah, we missed you. I missed you so much. What were you doing that was so important you couldn't come hang out with us?
I was installing a $24,000 Linux server. That's what I was doing.
At my house? Please?
No, it wasn't at your house. It was for a client, but it was super fun. We loaded it with the latest release of CentOS 8 and got now. So Cockpit actually comes pre-installed now with CentOS 8. And so it was the first time we've ever done an actual in production real server deployment with Cockpit. And so that was interesting. It was great to always know that we had the command line backup as in case we needed it, but we didn't need it the whole time. It worked flawlessly. And then the Virt Manager plugin to manage all the virtual machines was absolutely fantastic. And then we tied all of that in with pfSense and did site-to-site VPN tunnels and Road Warrior VPNs to get all of their employees back in. Then we hosted all of their individual workstations as individual libvirt virtualization machines on that host. And so they all VPN in, and then their office is essentially inside of one gigantic server. It's very cool. So actually the team that installed it with me is going to be on Ask Noah this week on Tuesday, and we're going to go step by step kind of what we did, how we did it, how we made the decisions, where we ran into some limitations with open source software, what we're doing to fix that, how the community can help if they want to participate. So yeah, it was a very enlightening and fun week.
So is everything set up the way you wanted it? Is it up and running and going, or you have more work to do?
Yeah, I mean, so as with any managed client, we don't deal in complete security. As always a moving target as our needs, and we want to evolve with that business. But right now, we are meeting their demand. We have accomplished the things that we set out to accomplish during the initial install.
Awesome, very good. So, Michael, do you have anything exciting like a $24,000 server that you set up?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've done at least, 24,000. I mean, I have like $48,000 server.
Wow,
that I set
$48,000.
up.
How do you like them apples, Noah?
Yeah,
he set up a $48,000 server.
Yeah.
I
mean,
so
it was in Minecraft.
Here are the things that make that unbelievable. One, it was $48,000, and the other thing was that Michael set it up. So
wow,
right.
Both of those things lead me to believe that Michael didn't set up a $48,000 server, but that's just my guess.
I mean, that's just so fair and completely accurate. But at the same time,
if you said that you built a world-class website,
then we would believe it.
Then we would believe that.
Yeah,
I actually am working on a big revamp of the website for Destination Linux.Network, and my goal is to have it in the next week before the Game Fest. So that's what my goal is, to have that and launch that at the same time. But basically, I'm just revamping various different things. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is, in addition to the revamping of the website, I'm creating a RSS feed of all of the shows all in one feed. So anybody who wants to just get updated, just subscribe to one feed and get everything all at once.
There's enough content there to keep you busy the whole week. I mean, that would be fire.
So Ryan, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I moved. As you could tell, the room is blank. There's no action figures on the wall. There's no Doctor Who wallpaper anymore. There's nothing. But I still took the time to set up my server to get everything up and running, to do this show with all of you, because that's how dedicated I am to Linux. But I think the interesting thing is the fact that I've been doing this show and my YouTube videos for the last few weeks on the Nook, the Simply Nook NUC 8i7 HNK mini PC. That means rendering all my videos. That means recording all my videos, doing shows, gaming, all of that on this little Nook. And when you're moving things, moving the giant servers and other computers and massive cases that I have is quite annoying. But this little Nook, I literally, when it was time to move, pulled it out, stuck it in a laptop bag, and brought it to my new house. And it's quite amazing to see what this little quad-core i7, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. Of course, I put some of the fastest Sabrent drives you can get in it as well. And it's using Thunderbolt 3 to run a eGPU on the Razer Core X with an NVIDIA 2070 in it. So it's a little bit pimped out of a Nook, but it's quite amazing what you can do with this little beast here. So that's been a lot of fun and really making me look at the market of these mini PCs. And I'm starting to plan a build to kind of do my own, just to see how much power I can pack in the smallest case possible, which is going to be a lot of fun for upcoming shows on the DOS Geek YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I didn't know you could make it like go that far with just a Nook. But I know the Nooks were like fairly powerful in what they can do. But that one, that sounds like it's going to be an exciting series.
This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform out there. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with their intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and so much more. Now, the thing that you don't really understand until you actually use it in production is because they're handling all of the outside parts of this and you just have to work on your actual servers, it means that the actual management of the servers is outsourced to somebody else. So when you need to move a server from one organization to the other, you need to get multiple people involved in a particular management of a server. That's easy to do with DigitalOcean. It also makes it possible to move your DigitalOcean droplet around to their numerous data centers to get the best performance that you need right there. You can get started right now for free with a $100 credit by going to do.co/DLN. You can use that $100 credit for spinning up over a dozen droplets or even one monster-sized droplet for 2 months. Again, you can get started by going to DigitalOcean with that $100 credit by going to do.co/DLN. And a huge thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring Destination Linux.
In the community feedback this week, Glenn writes us to say, I've been listening to your shows and really enjoy them. Your dynamic is spot on. So to the question about 2FA, asked mainly towards Noah, what happens when one of your employees loses the YubiKey? Do you always have Authy as a backup? Do you have a second key for every employee as a backup or spare? What happened? And if there's a lockout, how was it solved? What happens if the situation you mentioned where a person passes away, should they have given in another key to a trusted user or put that in the will or something like that? Thanks for the shows and the forthcoming answers. Regards, Glenn. So Noah, what is the solution for that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So essentially what you're talking about is identity management at that point. And so the way what we do with our customers is if they are a managed customer, which means that our entire team needs access to their servers because our entire team is going to manage it, then the people that are from that portion of our team that will manage those servers, those keys are listed in a key file, and we deploy those to each one of the servers. And then there's a system that updates those key files every 24 hours. And so if somebody is terminated or loses a key, we simply invalidate that key, and that propagates to all the servers and says, okay, those keys are no longer in use. Now, if the employee has the YubiKey and is just fired, this is where the real benefit is. But previously, every time that happened, we had to propagate a new key out. Now, in the place where we manage the server, that's not a problem. We add the key into our master database and it sends it out to all the servers. However, it gets to be problematic when it comes to things where they're not a managed service. They just call us as they need us, kind of a thing. In those sorts of contractor situations, a lot of times there's paperwork that has to be filled out when you want to add somebody or remove somebody from a server. And of course, anytime a credential is lost, it has to be reported. Now that we have a little template that we send out to the client that basically says, hey, we had an employee and they had one two-factor key that's used to authenticate into your servers, and that key was compromised. However, we just let you know the way that this works is that it's a PIN is required before it can unlock the key, and the key is destroyed after 3 attempts. Nevertheless, we're invalidating this key and we've replaced it with a new one. But just so you know, this is the thing that happened. At no time there's been any evidence that anybody got access to the server, blah, blah, blah. We're not actually worried about it because, again, they get that PIN wrong 3 times and the key is going to be toast. So you never, ever have just one employee with a key on an individual server, because you're right. If you were to lose that key, you'd be up a creek without a battle. The other part of that, though, is you definitely don't want backups of SSH keys, right? We want to track those individually. If a person has more than one key assigned to them, like I do, I have one on my work laptop, one on my personal laptop, one that sits in my house at my workstation. I've got one that's in a safety deposit box at the bank. All of those, if they're added into a server, are listed in some way or another so that we know if one of those keys goes missing or lost, we can simply invalidate it. Duplicating a key is a dangerous idea because it fundamentally steps right around the very thing that you're trying to control, which is that those keys are unique. And so if one is invalidated, then it can no longer be trusted. And as long as one is valid, you know that it can be trusted. So that's how we handle it. But it's a really great question.
So to answer the question about the will, because I feel like there may have been some more of a personal dynamic to this question as well. You mentioned a safety deposit box at the bank. I assume something happens to you, then your family would go to that safety deposit box, get that key, and they would have access to get into your personal bank or whatever is their information.
Yeah, no, because they don't. My family wouldn't know the PIN, right? So my wife has her own key, and she has her own PIN for her own key, so she could get into anything that way if she needed to. And yes, I trust her with all the same things I have. So she has a process to follow to get into God mode for all of our clients and stuff like that, so that there is continuity should something happen to me. But no, the safety deposit box is there for my benefit. What if I am traveling, backpacking or something, and I somehow suffer the misfortune of my house burning down, my office burning down, or maybe some natural disaster rolls through Grand Forks, and simultaneously I lose all of the stuff that's on my back or on my person for some reason.
Like a Sharknado. Yeah.
What happens in the worst case scenario? What's my absolute fallback? Well, it's a safety deposit box in a drastically different geographical location that I can go get if all else fails. Here's the thing. I'd rather have that key sitting in there for the $15 a month that cost me and not need it than need it and not have it.
Awesome.
We love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send us a short email, a video. It may just get incorporated into the show. You can send those links to comments at DestinationLinux.Network. Kali Linux is out with the new release 2020.3, and one of the major updates to this release is the switch from BAS to ZSH. The thing that we were talking about off air, and that we're hoping to bring Ryan and Michael in and kind of have this discussion here, is essentially what is happening inside of the Linux sphere, because what we've seen is this happening. Mac OS took this step. Now Kali Linux is taking this step, and you have to wonder, there are some definite benefits to going in or to moving to a different shell, but is this the best shell for us all to take? And why is it that all of these different operating systems are moving from what has been the standard from the command line utility over to a different one? That's particularly interesting in Kali because with Kali Linux, you're primarily targeting an audience of people that are very comfortable on the command line. These are people that probably were using these tools long before there was ever a distribution around them to kind of make it easier. And so the fact that the shell in that distro is moving seems like that's of note. What do you guys think?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Bash versus ZSH in the next main topic of this episode. But we wanted to talk about this because it's pretty interesting that Kali Linux is doing these sorts of things, especially with the WSL Win-Kex thing, because that is. And it's interesting for multiple levels in the fact that you can only do certain features in Kali Linux in a full distribution of Linux. So you have to have all of root and everything to be able to do it. So you're limited in what you can even do by using the WSL version of it. So it kind of confuses me, like, what's the value of having that?
Is that the same with WSL2 though? Because isn't WSL2 the full kernel?
Well, it's a full kernel, but it's also wrapped inside of the Hyper-V sort of stuff. So it's not really a full thing. It's not like it's still wrapped inside of the WSL, inside of the Windows environment, so it can only get so much access to the core structure. So it's just kind of interesting, like why they decided to do that.
Maybe the idea is you use Win-Kex to hack Windows.
Well, that's the whole point of Kali Linux, really, is to hack Windows.
But I mean, maybe they're incorporating it. You can kind of see your hack. You've got to, but I don't know why you would need the graphical version of it, other than people relying on GUIs and things to accomplish that. But I guess you could see the results of what you're hacking right there.
Yeah.
I'm not a hacker. We kind of need Buh to answer that for us.
If Buh would like to send a comments, or anybody who's a hacker would like to let us know about the reason why there's a value here, please let us know in the comments. I do want to say there's some interesting things about the Net Hunter thing that Kali does. For those who are not aware of Net Hunter, it's essentially Kali Linux, but for phones. And it allows you to do like all kinds of stuff through over Bluetooth, and they set up a new Bluetooth tool structure, and they call it the Bluetooth Arsenal and some other stuff. So, but yeah, I think that we should get to the shell discussion.
Whoa, no, Michael, we can't transition yet because there's one big announcement here we cannot pass up, and that is they've added Nokia support. And there are 4 people on the planet I know that are super excited about that.
Yes, exactly. I'm not one of those.
Nokia support's there.
Yeah.
So Nokia support, everyone. You're welcome. You heard it here first.
Yep. We could not move on from that. Thank you for stopping me before we lost the potential of those 4 people.
Our security advisory this week is brought to you by Bitwarden. And this may sound simple, but I know some technical people that get caught up in this to this day. And that is stop clicking links in your email. While for many of us, I hope that's an obvious statement, an obvious security tip. But I'm telling you, there are some really highly technical people I know that are like, I got a virus again. My computer's all messed up. What happened? I clicked on one of those emails, or it's a phishing attack and they lose access to their bank, to photos, to cloud management and things because they're clicking these links. They make these websites look just like the real deal. And people are getting fooled by this. In fact, they're getting fooled by it so much that there are 3 billion fake emails sent out every single day. And so they're just casting a mass net across, and they're catching a lot of people with this type of thing. So when you get an email from your bank, you get an email from an account, and I've seen a lot of clever ones now that are kind of like, hey, your account's been compromised on whatever bank you use, or maybe it's just a gaming service. If you've authorized this, click here. If you didn't authorize this, click here and we'll take care of it for you. And you click, and of course, it's a fake site. So they get more and more clever. And people utilize their real names in their emails. Sometimes you ever seen people do this? They'll put their real first name and last name, which makes the hack even seem more legitimate because it's like, hey, Ryan, your bank, blah, blah, blah. You've been hacked and compromised. And because people are using their actual full names in their email addresses. And of course, then you can go back to the fact that if somebody was particularly targeting you, if you use a lot of social media sites, it'd be pretty easy for them to learn enough about you to fool you out there. So don't click on links in your email. Instead, if there's something you're worried about actually happening, because it could be a legitimate warning, just open up a browser. And I know it takes an extra 3 seconds, but manually type.
Man, 3 seconds is just too much. Like, it's just
too much.
Can't. Okay.
You're asking a lot, Ryan.
But it was actually kind of funny because, like, just this week I got an email telling me there was like an email to Destination Linux saying that the Destination Linux mail server is full, and you need to click this link to add more storage. I'm like, no, thank you. So that's perfect.
Well, it's legitimate. It was full. I was trying to get your credentials though, Michael, but it didn't work. But anyways,
sorry.
Good job on that. Well, you want another way to stay secure? Get a good password manager. The password manager that we all use and trust is Bitwarden. It's the easiest and safest for individuals, teams, businesses, anybody out there that needs password management. This is your tool, or to store sensitive information. We want you to head to bitwarden.com/DLN and you can get started for free. But the best part is, if you want to help fund an open source project that's just absolutely amazing part of the community, then you can get started for $10. That's for their premium account, $10. And by the way, that's for the whole year, not a month, not a week, the whole year, just $10. You get a gigabyte of encrypted file storage, 2-step login with the YubiKey that we were talking about earlier, Vault health reports, TOTP authentication, storage and generation, priority customer support. They also have easy, quick drop downs for setting more complex passwords, setting up passphrases, however you like to do your password management. They have a feature there for it. It also works across all of your devices. If I have my cell phone on me, I have my passwords there with me. If I'm on my home computer, I have my passwords there with me. I need a plugin for my browser. They have that too. And if you want, you can even spin up your own server with Bitwarden. They're just an amazing company. Head to bitwarden.com/DLN. Get started for free. Let them know that we sent you by going to that link. And we want to thank Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux. All right. So I know Noah's chomping at the bit for this topic. And so let's get into it here. ZSH versus Bash. So let's just set the stage again for what's happened. Mac OS has been on Bash forever. I know a lot of people hate Apple and don't want to talk about it, but they are the biggest tech company in the world today. But in Catalina, they recently switched to ZSH. It was interesting, but again, who cares about Apple? So we kind of move on. But then Kali switched from Bash to ZSH, and that kind of caught my attention when two completely different companies on completely different spectrums decide to move from Bash to ZSH. Now, in my 30 days of playing in Apple, one of the things that I didn't realize because I hadn't played in Apple for a long time is I'd open the terminal and type all these commands that I'm used to typing in Bash, and all of them were working in Mac OS. And I was like, that's fascinating to me that all these commands are still available. What are they using? Well, it was ZSH. So the transition between the two, ZSH and Bash, is pretty natural. There are some differences there, but for the most part, I was able to just go and do whatever I was normally doing right there. There are some specific features when I was doing research on this of why ZSH, some people make the argument, is a great alternative. I don't want to say better because I don't think there's necessarily better. Bash has been around forever. But what people talk about and say in the articles about Bash versus ZSH is you have options for things like automatic CD. So you just type the name of the directory instead of having to put CD, change directory, and it will go to the directory. So I just type documents as an example, and it would just go there. You can share your command history across multiple terminals. You have recursive path expansion. You have things like plugins and theme support, and they have a very extensive plugin and theme support system called Oh My ZSH with over 250 plus plugins available and 150 different themes. Now, I don't know about you all, but to me, I don't even pay attention. I didn't in Mac when I was playing with it. I just open a terminal and try to do my work. I really don't pay attention to what it is. But maybe we should start. And that's really the conversation topic here is ZSH the future? Is this where we should go? Is Mac and Kali kind of leading the way here where we're going to change out our shells from Bash to ZSH?
So I think that we should start that conversation by having an open conversation about what terminals what shells everybody is using and what people prefer, and then talk about the technical merits and demerits. Because when I initially hear if I was going to switch from the tried and true Bash, and the reason that I stick with Bash is because it's available everywhere. If I wanted to change from that, if I was going to venture out, the first question I would ask is, what's the best shell? And I don't think ZSH would be at the top of the list. I think it'd be closer to something like Fish.
Whoa, you can't bring Fish in here. That is unfair.
Why?
That is illegal. Red flag. You cannot bring
flag
Fish
on the
into
play.
This conversation.
So consider this, right? Look at what PowerShell is doing. Look at what Windows is doing with PowerShell. They are trying to reinvent the terminal for the command line and make it more powerful than ever. And what they have a head start because they started with Bash and now they're adding on to it and making it better. We have done that too with things like Fish, but that's not the standard. And so it's not rolled out on every server. Therefore, a lot of people don't standardize around it.
Okay.
So Noah, have you played in PowerShell?
Yes, I have.
And what are your honest thoughts on it? Because I was pretty impressed.
Here's my honest thoughts. My honest thoughts are it's exactly what happens when you take an open source product and an open source way of developing things and then stack millions of dollars behind it with developers and a paid company with a shared common end goal. And that's what happens, right? Microsoft tried this way and it didn't quite work. And open source made so much more clunky. They didn't really roll along. It just kind of like ambled along, but we got further and Microsoft looked over and went, why is their train so far ahead of ours? Let's get on their train. And they just got behind the open source train and just pushed with a bunch of money. The problem is they're pushing the train in a given direction. And that is the Windows Azure sphere. They want that to be the premium product, and they're going to get there because they're taking all of the cool lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years and using them to build their product. What I'm trying to get at here with the shell is we have done that same thing. Our ambling along has worked, but where that's at right now, if you ask most Linux enthusiasts, they'll tell you it's fish shell. So why are these distributions choosing a less shell? And to a certain degree, it almost kind of feels like we're just following Apple. They pulled the headphone jack, so Samsung pulls the headphone jack. macOS moves to ZSH. Now other distributions move to ZSH. And the kind of distribution, by the way, that people tend to use when they don't want to live in Linux day in, day out. That's the Kali Linux laptop. That's the Kali Linux virtual machine, right? Because it doesn't sound like a lot of the people that I know that use Kali Linux would be looking for an alternative to Bash to begin with.
Right. It's interesting. Now, Michael, going back to the PowerShell, and then we're going to get into Fish, because Fish, in my opinion, does trump this argument and is where my mind went when I was playing with ZSH. But I remember you had at your lug someone do a presentation on PowerShell, and we had some really funny offline conversations about this where you're like, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then you're like, darn it, when you looked at it, because they have taken the best of what we've done in Linux and then piled a lot on top of it.
He asked if, like, is anybody interested in doing it? And I was like, I don't want to be shown that it's better, but I'm open to listen. So he does like a 15-20 minute like demonstration of what PowerShell can do and like what's different about it and that stuff. And then like the beginning of it's like, I'm just going to tell you up front, I don't want to like this. So you have a really big battle to, the hill to climb kind of thing. And then at the very end, I just say, okay, I like it, and I don't like that I like it, but you're right, it is better. Like, it is actually much better in the sense of, like, it's when it compared to Bash, it's way better. It also has object-oriented, like, programming and coding built into it, so you can do not only just scripting, you can actually do programming with PowerShell. So it is way better than Bash. But in comparison to how much better is it in Fish, that's a different debate, because you could argue that Fish has a lot more, it's like ZSH is better than Bash. Fish arguably is better than Bash, PowerShell, and also ZSH. So it's kind of weird that Fish is never in the debate. Like,
well, I looked this up, Michael. I looked up why don't distributions utilize Fish by default. And you want to know the reason I got from everyone? The only reason I could find is it's heavy. It's heavier.
Yeah, like, it's like a couple kilobytes or
out
something.
There? What kind of computers do you guys use in Linux? From like, are you using like calculators you repurpose to be a computer where you think that Fish is a heavy shell?
What are you talking about?
Seriously.
So how heavy is it, Ryan?
It must be a whole, like, I don't know, 5 kilobytes to extra to run the thing. I mean, I couldn't imagine my poor Texas Instrument computer can't handle it.
What? That's like 5,000 extra bytes, though.
I'd really like to know how much heavier it is, because if you have, I mean, there's a valid argument to be made. If you're going to run 30 some terminals at the same time, if it just bogs down and crash, I'd be interested in seeing that. But I know plenty of people that run Fish on, and have 3 monitors worth of terminals and don't seem to have an issue.
So, in terms of like the actual, there's 2 arguments. One is the one you see the most of the time is the heaviness of it. But in comparison to, it's a shell still. So the difference between Bash and ZSH and Fish is like ridiculous. It's nothing. Who cares? Unless you're using a TRS-80, then okay. But there's the one that's actually a problematic is the POSIX compliance of like how things are expected to be used. It's not really POSIX compliance because they try to do things that are more innovative and therefore sometimes is not necessarily compliant to the concept of POSIX.
This is what I keep hearing come up. Is this really like a compliance thing where we've made up this random rule or philosophy, or is this something that actually a compliance that we need, because without it, it actually breaks things? Because this idea of being stuck on some philosophy, like we're dealing with a religion here, is really silly in the Linux world. Like, well, we have this philosophy, so we can't go to this thing that's better because it doesn't fit the philosophy that somebody set up 20 years ago, that they wouldn't even know the power of computers today, or have any idea when they were setting up the philosophy that it would matter today. Like, I don't get it.
I get where you're coming from, and to an extent I agree. At the same time, standardization and following standardization is a good thing, and the desire to conform to the standard or change the standard if we decide the standard is no longer working is a good thing to strive after.
But who does that in the open source world when everybody's chaotically going in their own direction?
Yeah. But we should.
The weird thing is that we do have, a lot of the times we do have some standards that we set, but there are things that don't really need to be standard. Like, there's no value of bash over fish. It's slightly more resources in fish, but like, who cares? And if fish was the standard, then the compliance of POSIX wouldn't be a big deal, because the scripts and everything would be compatible with the same level. But the same thing is, like, in terms of like the POSIX compliance of, is it necessary? Not really, because there's a lot of stuff that's not POSIX compliant. I'd have never liked the philosophy of POSIX or Unix philosophy or whatever. And it's a problem because they say that it's for people who don't know what this philosophy is, it's to say that create something simplistically and do it well. So it's make one thing and do it well. And it sounds like a great thing to have. But at the same time, that means that if you're only doing one thing, you're combining multiple things to accomplish a big task of an operating system, or insert whatever task you want to do.
So this is the I hate system D argument.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's more of like this philosophy to me doesn't work. Because if you have one tool and it depends on other tools, and let's say, for example, the one thing is doing it better, but you do it at a big scale, you have an issue of like dozens and dozens of projects. If one of those projects decides to stop doing the work, then you've created a big breakpoint for all of the other projects that depend on it. Like, that is a very problematic approach, and it's just because of this idea that you can't have complexity and also.
Well, this is why we can't have nice things, because of stuff like this.
Yeah, and that's actually a philosophy.
I like Noah's
that's been
idea,
around
though. I like the
decades.
idea that we would have a foundation that would kind of determine the direction of these things and help facilitate the conversations.
Yeah,
but I don't think we have an organization out there that really. I mean, there's some that kind of, I think, put themselves out there and say they do that, but I don't see it ever happening in any scale, at least in my vision that I've seen of anybody doing that. But I think it is worth a discussion to say, should we be moving to these different things? What about PowerShell? Should Linux move to PowerShell?
If it's open source and it's better than what we have available today, then yes, we should look into. Who cares where it came from?
But icky, Microsoft icky.
I know, but we do that all day.
But if it's
long.
open source, it doesn't matter.
That one
I'm
came
just
from
kidding.
Canonical, and they don't do this, and that one came from Red Hat, and they don't do this, and that. Now we're gonna do it. Now we're gonna play this game with Microsoft too. Are you kidding me?
I think if it's going to be open source, yeah. I mean, to be fair, Microsoft has been awful for decades. But at the same time, if it's open source, the whole purpose of open source is to have a built-in mechanism where we don't have to worry about who is creating that content or whatever. So that is a good point. But at the same time, the only reason I would say why not PowerShell is because I think Fish and PowerShell are on a very close tier they're comparable. I think that Fish maybe not as good because I don't think Fish has the object-oriented programming aspect, but at the same time, I think there's a little bit of complexity unnecessarily added through that because I don't really want to use a scripting thing for programming. I'd rather use a programming language for that. So it's kind of like it can do something that's really interesting, but is it necessary to be there? So I think that in terms of the shell aspect, that Fish is a good option. It's something where when I first tried Fish, I was like, oh, this changes so many things. And basically, it has the spelling, spelling corrections and like autocomplete and all this other stuff. It's just really nice to have that in your shell. But at the same time, I do find myself not installing it I don't use the command line that much to care that often.
Yeah, because you grew up on one that didn't have it. What I'm saying is when you have an audience of people, which is clearly what I think Apple and Kali are catering towards, where they come from a completely Windows world, and now they have maybe some basic experience on something like PowerShell, and they want to have a tool to go do penetration tests. And they come over to Kali. What shell are they going to sit down at? That's your target audience. And I think that's a really worthwhile discussion worth having. And I don't think it ends with ZSH.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I based on in that perspective, I think you're totally right, and I think that people maybe should check out the alternatives and see if there is something better than Bash instead of just waiting for someone else to follow
Bash
the leader.
was created in 1989, so maybe it's time to look somewhere else, or maybe it's not. Maybe we stick with Bash, but I agree we have those conversations. By the way, ZSH was created by Paul Falstad at Princeton University, and when I hear Princeton, I think it's got to be good. It's from Princeton, right? And then Fish was created by Axel, and I will not pronounce his last name. But all of these are options, including PowerShell out there. It's not something I think we think about very often. And to Noah's point, I think that may be the problem. We don't think about it because we've been in Linux, we use Bash. It just makes sense to us. But somebody who's coming over and students and things they're coming to learn for the first time, they may want something like Fish where it's doing spelling correction, where it has better auto completion, where it's more user friendly to make them not be constantly searching for the GUI when you can do things so much faster in a shell.
Yeah, I'm actually going to also admit something. Like you're not grown up in it. You don't have it, so you don't know it, and it's easier not to change and that kind of thing. And the exact same argument is things that I've said to people about systemd who don't want to change their configs and they don't want to change their scripts and stuff like that. And it's like, so flipping that back on me is kind of, I guess I will,
You're welcome.
I will use some more different options.
Now we're going to get into our gaming section, and I just want to bring one more time to your attention. We have an amazing game night set up for the community of Destination Linux. Come game with us live at 4 o'clock Eastern, August 30th. We're going to have an absolute blast. We're even going to have Jill there and Noah, and it's just going to be so much fun because we're going to play Tuxkart, Xonotic, Gang Beasts, Shell Shock, and Golf with Your Friends. So those are the games to go download or just get one if you want. Xonotic is free, Tuxkart is free, and I think the other ones may have a small cost to them, but definitely if you want to game with us, August 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern, come jump in, play some games, have some fun. And look, if you're bad at games, you need an easy target, you don't want to look bad, go after Noah. Trust me, it's going to be an easy kill for you.
Yeah, I can confirm that it'll be an easy kill for them.
But if you want to head to DestinationLinux.Network/GameFest, you can get all the information you're going to need there. DestinationLinux.Network/GameFest. But the game this week that I picked is called SpiritFarer. Now, this game is very interesting. It was created by Thunder Lotus Games. They also created the very popular title Sundered. And SpiritFarer is about management game about dying. As the ferry master to the deceased, you build a boat to explore the world, care for your spirit friends, and guide them across mystical seas to finally release them into the afterlife. It has 239 already very positive reviews out there for this game. It has gorgeous graphics, and while it has this kind of dark premise, you can see there's this, life lesson here in this game. And it reminds me of, there are games like this War of Mine that actually leave you thinking about life a little bit differently when you play them. And this is that kind of game. So it's going to be more story and imagination here, but beautiful hand-drawn art. You get to build and manage and improve. You got the inventory management system in there. You can farm, mine, fish, harvest, all of these different things. But there's these moments where you have to take this friend that you've built and take them into the afterlife and say that it's okay and talk them through these moments, which I think are quite emotional and probably, as they describe it, unforgettable moments of trying to let somebody go in your life. So I just think it's interesting when we take these games and we kind of cross into the realm where movies have done for us for so long, where they tackle these very emotional life experiences that we have in a very different way. And I really like the idea of this game and can't wait to spend some time and play this myself.
Yeah, I never thought I would be interested in a game like this, but when I saw, if you referencing this War of Mine is one of those things that makes me kind of think about this might be a really cool game to play, because I never thought I would be interested in this kind of approach to a game. Then I played this War of Mine, and it was very enlightening. It was a very interesting concept. So this one sounds kind of similar to that, like you said. So I think that's a really cool approach to it. And I also like the kind of the mix between combining it with mythology and stuff like that to kind of have a setting for it. It's pretty cool.
We're continuing our exploration of the Linux-based file system. Now, as we've talked about in previous weeks, everything on Linux is a file, and that can make working with Linux very easy, and it also makes understanding Linux can be a little challenging sometimes. So we've covered things like temp, bin, boot, and dev. This week we're covering etc. etc might be one of the most important directories on the entire Linux file system, and that's because etc contains all of the necessary files for configuration and operation of your computer. Now, despite what a lot of people think, it does not stand for etc. Inside of etc, you'll find things, for example, the configuration for your SSH. You'll find things like the configuration for fstab that mounts your drives when it boots up, or crontab that deals with scheduling. All of these things must be kept secure, and obviously you want to restrict people that can access them, so only a sudo user or the root user would be able to access files like that. One of the other things that are included in there is the shadow file, or the password, etc/psswd, and this is what defines users and tells you where their directories are created, and contains the hash actually for their passwords. All of this is being stored in etc. And so a lot of times when you're working on a server or on a home PC, that's the directory that you want to be most careful with. It's also one of the directories that's very worthwhile backing up, because a lot of programs that run system-wide will store their configurations there. And so simply backing those configurations up will give you a really great idea of how you set that program up, or that weird thing that you troubleshot one time. You'll have all of that stuff backed up. All of that's stored in /etc. We would tell you that this is a kind of a dangerous directory, so we wouldn't encourage you to go playing around in there. Understand what those files are, understand what they do, and then also understand that sometimes you can crawl in there and edit the files by hand. Other times there are programs like, for example, the grub config, while it's stored, it's generated by another application and then placed oftentimes in etc. So be aware of which files you can edit by hand and which files you can't, and understand them before you go playing in there.
Or hack the planet and just edit anything.
Or do what Ryan says and then give Altispeed Technologies a call when you break your computer.
Yeah, just hack the planet. All right, so our tip of the week this week is I don't want to
say it.
No. Okay.
So all the kids in the crowd in the cars with their parents can laugh.
Okay, it's called broadcast using this tool. Now
Michael.
Okay, well, that's what it means. Okay.
When people look it up, they won't find it by that.
Okay, I apologize for anyone who has a problem with this, but it's called BUTT. BUTT, broadcast using this tool. They guarantee they chose this name for that reason, and it's ridiculous.
Anyway, I saw an app called BUTT, and I was like, Michael needs to have to. I gave the article to you.
Yeah, of course you did.
So here, if nobody's used this tool before, despite the funny name, it's actually a fantastic tool. The reality is that in everything we do is with audio over IP is really being done with RTP packets these days, and so that is true for SIP, and that's true for professional codecs that are used by radio stations, and that is also true for internet broadcasting, which is primarily done with a protocol called IceCast. And IceCast is just a stream of RTP packets, audio packets. And what broadcast using this tool is a tool that allows you to capture a device like a microphone, USB audio interface, mixer, and send that as an IceCast stream up somewhere or to something. So you may, for example, want to do a very high quality podcast with your friends, and you could, for example, set BUTT up to send a stream all to one person so that they would have an uncompressed feed at their end. That's one way you could use it. We could have a dedicated audio stream that has a very high quality feel to it. That's what we do for Ask Noah, so that people can listen to the show, and that's not being re-encoded, and you don't hear all of those things. That's all just pure opus being delivered. That's possible thanks to tools like BUTT. And so this is one of the better ones out there because it's very simple. It doesn't really require a lot of configuration. It's pretty easy to get up and running, and it works really well. So
if I open up the software store, what do I type in?
You'll open up your app store, which is not a store for apps, and then you'll search for BUTT, BUTT.
BUTT. Okay.
Yeah. If you get disconnected from broadcasting, is it kicked butt?
No, if you get disconnected, it's oh, never mind.
Kick butt. Well done, Michael. Well done.
Thank you.
So a big thank you to each and every one of you for watching or listening to Destination Linux. If you want more DL, become a patron. Like all of these beautiful people here with us today, you get to watch the show live. Hear all the in-between banter that we have on all the discussions going on. And if you can't make the live show, that's okay too, because you get the unedited versions of the show that you can watch at your leisure. And if you become a patron, you can come and join us live to troll Michael, which is probably the perk we get the best feedback on, that people love the most. So definitely consider checking out Patron or sponsors.
And also, you definitely want to join the patrons, because you can be a part of the patron post show, which is an awesome time. And also, if you want to represent your love of DL and open source, you can check out the Destination Linux Network store and get some DLN swag. We have t-shirts, hoodies, more mugs, and so much more, including DLN stickers.
What?
Yes.
We have stickers now?
Yes, and that...
Wait, so I can have my favorite show, the Ask Noah Show sticker?
Yes, you can. In fact, you can have multiples, because it's a sticker sheet. So when you buy one sticker, you get an entire sheet of all the shows all in one, and you have a bunch of different options. And at the same time, I do want to let you know that there's a weird quirk on the store when you try to check out. Make sure you click the 5x7, because otherwise you'll be paying the same amount for a smaller amount of sticker, or smaller size stickers. So go check out the Destination Linux store by going to DestinationLinux.Network/store.
And if you didn't understand any of that, don't worry. There are people that can help you do it in the DLN community. That's the extension of the Destination Linux show. The DLN, we have our discourse forum, which will have you feeling hinged on all things Linux. If you want more interactive chat, then come hang with us in our Telegram group. Finally, if you want to play some games, head over to the DLN Discord server and set up some sweet game sessions.
Yep. Nailed it. Perfect. We've got some more awesome content for you on the DLN website, so head over to DestinationLinux.Network, where you'll find all sorts of open source goodness, from podcast to YouTube channels and so much more.
All right, everybody, have a great week, and remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye. Bye-bye, guys.
That's perfect. I'm putting that in there. Patrons, if you want to join us in the post show, you can turn your cameras on, your microphones on, and everything.
How y'all doing?
We're doing good, man.
What?
How are you?
All right.
Just all right? You're here with us and you're just all right? I mean, come on.
Well, okay. I'm better now. Now
There
that
you
we can
go. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you for saying so.
He didn't set it up at all. That was not prompted whatsoever. That was perfect. Thanks.
Absolutely.